As we're facing a troubled world and building a new one as we go, holding each other stronger together, standing as a people so bold.
In this episode of People So Bold, I am talking to Adam Slate, a ministerial student of Jewish background who was one of the team builders behind Unitarian Friends of Palestine. Adam talks about his experience visiting Israel and Gaza last year and how it has increased his empathy for the plight of the Palestinians, along with all marginalized people in the area. Please note that any political views stated during the course of this interview are personal and not intended to represent the UK Unitarians as a whole. Hello, I am here with Adam Slate, a Unitarian ministry student, member at New Unity in London, and you may see him leading services around the UK as part of his studies. Adam is one of the founding members, probably the wrong way to put it, but he's one of the instigators of this new group that has bubbled up in the past few weeks, Unitarian Friends of Palestine. So I'm going to be talking to him today about his role with that group and the vision for the future and how we can, as Unitarians, keep that conversation going in a constructive way. So good morning, Adam.
Hi, Ann. How are you?
Good. I'm fine. Thank you. What motivated you to start this WhatsApp group, Unitarian Friends of Palestine?
I have been the issue right now that's unfolding in Gaza has been something that I think has challenged a lot of people, and it's been a hard thing to talk about. And I think this group gives a place to talk about that. I think Friends of Palestine may be a bit of a misnomer. I think of the group as being Friends of Humanity, but kind of in the context of like Black Lives Matter, it is, I think, valuable to name the Palestinian situation. I should say up front, because I think even saying what I just said has the potential to alienate some people and shut some people down, that I am of Jewish heritage. And one of the reasons I feel like I want to address the situation in Israel and Palestine in an open way is because I feel like that's important to model. And I think I also need to say as a preface to any other comments that I make that I think that violence against civilians in all cases is not acceptable. I think what Hamas did on October 7th was a crime against humanity. And I think a lot of the systemic and direct violence by the Israeli military against the Palestinian people does amount to crimes against humanity. And I come into this conversation with an awareness that it might be easy to pigeonhole a comment into one side or another. But what I really want is for all people to be free and live in safety.
Right. And that's, a super important point, because I think this is where this conversation gets bogged down a lot, is as soon as people hear that you're supporting Palestine, it means that by the same token that you're supporting Hamas, which is not at all what I've seen anyway in this movement to encourage peace in the Gaza and the Middle East. So describe, those first, you started right away, you started organizing to participate in the demonstrations that have happened in London. So what was the mood at the first one you attended with Unitarians?
The mood, I think many people are heartbroken by the situation right now. We were with, hundreds of thousands of people. There wasn't a huge Unitarian contingent, but we were there sharing the grief of a very difficult situation and sharing the solidarity with many Muslims and Palestinians and Jews and Israelis and Christians and people of other identity groups who are all looking for the same thing, all looking for peace, all looking for civilians to be safe. And I almost, the situation there is so terrible. I don't really want to say it felt good to be in that kind of community, but it was really kind of a special place to be in the context of a very fractured conversation, and a conversation where it's very easy for people to only hear information from one side, or to only see the perspective of one side, to be in this very diverse and very large group.
And was that sort of the point of it as well? I mean, because it feels like these marches often, and there's the same thing when after Brexit, I remember I was in a bunch of those as well, and you knew you weren't actually, the vote had happened, it wasn't going to actually change what had happened, but being in solidarity with so many of the people who felt the same way was a comfort of some kind. And is that the kind of what was happening with these marches?
I would say that it's a little bit different in that what is going on in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories is unfolding every day. And so the vote, metaphorically speaking, there's a vote every day. And so there's still, the count right now is that close to 5,000 children have been killed in the bombings in Gaza, and another however many hundred will have been killed, in 2 weeks from now, or if or when the ceasefire ends. So this conversation is very much in play. The fear and uncertainty that exists, I think, on both sides. So we need to remember that most Palestinians are not Hamas, and most Jews are not the Israeli government and the current kind of dominant voice in Israeli politics right now, but that there is this fear and uncertainty on both sides. Jews having thousands of years of looking for a safe place in the world, and Palestinians having dealt with 75 years since the Nakba, the catastrophe where hundreds of year-old villages were destroyed and people were displaced from homes and moved to refugee camps. This is all very much in play right now. So the marches are to urge the government to think really critically about how to move forward in this very complex situation.
And so is the idea just to keep having them, because it seems like there are it seems like every week now that they're reorganizing, and that there's still that pressure. And so for the foreseeable future, is that the idea?
I believe the plan is to meet every single Saturday,
right,
until, for as long as there is justice work that needs to be done. And I hope it's sustained for a long time, and I hope people see it and hear it. Certainly, the approach that the British government and that the U.S. government take towards Israel allow this to continue, allow Israeli policy to continue. And again, as a Jewish person, I don't think this policy is good for Israel. I don't think Jewish people in Israel will ever feel safe as long as the Israeli government is I won't say indiscriminately, but not taking a humanitarian approach to how it engages in conflict with Hamas, with other more military groups that may exist within the larger Palestinian people. It's not good for anyone.
Right. And I think it is just one of those things that with the external governments having such an influence, there is absolutely a role for the UK to play, and the US and Europe. We're all in a way complicit with this unless we make changes. What do you think as Unitarians that we can do to further this conversation in a productive way?
I think we can do a number of things. Your podcast is called People So Bold. And I think one of the things we can do is to boldly seek to have conversation in areas that can be fraught with complexity and diverse opinion and some, I think, lack of information, things people think we know, but we don't necessarily know. So just making clear that there is a human issue here that we shouldn't be ignoring. Unitarians, one of the things we're good at is honoring the humanity of every person, and we can continue to do that and hold that up. We can grieve many lost lives that everyone is heartbreaking. As a people of faith, we can keep very close in our hearts the mandate to love our neighbor and the stranger, which is kind of a maybe more theoretical to us most of the time, but we really have to sit with right now, given the conflict between two groups of people who feel so far apart. And I think we also need to hold this space with the other conflicts that are going on in the world. I mean, as we're wrestling with this, there is a terrible humanitarian crisis that's unfolded in the Sudan, and there is a war going on in the Ukraine, and there are other hot conflict spots, and we have to hold that space as well. So there's plenty of work for Unitarians who want to really engage with our faith, to be part of the conversation and the work that needs to happen right now.
And that is a really good point about all the other conflicts that are still raging right now and how we need to keep those in our minds as well. Have you felt any pushback from your engagement with this issue, specifically the Gaza issue?
I have a little bit, but I'm reluctant to characterize it as pushback. I think there has been silence and concern about speaking up. And I've definitely had people, Unitarians and people I know personally from the Jewish community, including some family who have, because of concerns, have had trouble seeing the whole picture. I mean, I think one person sort of expressed that they thought my views were kind of extreme, but I also appreciate that there's a lot of historical context, and there is a lot of political context, and there is a lot of social context to absorb. So I was actually in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory in the West Bank in January. And, I describe myself as a person of faith and as someone training for ministry to hold up the humanity of everyone. But it wasn't until I actually spent time in Palestine that the picture became clear for me. One of the things that is sort of being demonized right now is this Palestinian phrase, from the river to the sea. It's being characterized as an anti-Semitic phrase. And when I was in Israel and Palestine, I heard that phrase a number of times and had it explained to me. If you're a Palestinian and you live in Israel proper, you are subject to a certain set of rules that make you a second-class citizen within Israel, even though you are living and have always lived in Israel. If you're in the West Bank, you're subject to another set of rules. You have to stay within the green zone within the West Bank. There is a border wall with checkpoints that open and close at random and can make it impossible to figure out things like whether you're going to get to work on time on any given day. I literally saw this first day there. Our bus was heading to Bethlehem and a border crossing shut down 5 minutes beforehand, and we had to take a 45-minute detour. And then Gaza is penned in. You can't move from Gaza into Israel. So Palestinians don't have contact with each other. They can't move freely. They're subject to different rules. So this phrase, from the river to the sea, means that all Palestinians should be free and treated equally and humanely within the whole area, and that this kind of dichotomy isn't tenable. It's a very anti-oppressive, justice-oriented rallying cry, for lack of a better term. And I feel like it's been gutted a bit. And I don't know if that's intentional or it's just something that there's a lot of sensitivity around. But there is across Israel and the occupied territories, a systemic level of control that really treats Palestinians in a way that makes it difficult to live. And it wasn't until I was there, it wasn't until I visited a refugee camp that is the most tear-gassed place on earth and met wonderful people and families, till I saw the graffiti art on the border wall that talked about freedom movements, other freedom movements around the world. George Floyd was depicted. There was a mural that depicted solidarity with Mexico and liberation movements going on there. I didn't see all that. I didn't see all that, and most people don't see that. So it's not hard if you only have one perspective, maybe as a Muslim or as a Jew or as a British person or an American person, to think you've seen the whole picture. And that's something that, we all have to work through.
Right.
That was a long answer.
No, but I mean,
there's so much there to unpack, Anne, that I feel like if every single person could spend time in the occupied Palestinian territories and spend time with Jewish people, this conversation would be dramatically different.
These conversations between the different groups, as for one word, are something that just need to happen more. I mean, one of the things that popped up in Lewisham, where I'm a member, is Piece of Cake, which is a local Muslim woman who, after the riots in Paris in 2015, she started this. I mean, it's a very, very simple idea. You literally just get people around together with cake and coffee and tea and have a conversation. But it is an interface. The idea is to bring in as many people from as many different faiths as possible, and not. I mean, it's not just a faith thing. But until we stop othering each other, I think this is where a lot of the feelings come from. But there is so much. Obviously, we're so aware of anti-Semitism and not wanting to do anything to enable that you can go too far the other way, and then also not be at all sympathetic to the Palestinian cause and the absolute apartheid that's happening there, because that is what it is. But there is a way that we can, humanize both sides, and I think that's what you were talking about. Yeah,
I'm glad you mentioned apartheid, because it's a triggering term. It is also a legal definition. It is not an emotional characterization. And I would urge people to go to the Amnesty International site. I saw a pretty good report on the Cornell University site. And according to quite a large portion of the international community, what is happening in Israel is considered apartheid by the legal definition, in terms of having separate sets of rules and policies and treatment of different groups within one governmental state. And it's important to realize that, because it has been the source of what is now generational trauma in Palestine, and refugee camps that are raided night after night. And when I was there, a 15-year-old boy was killed in a refugee camp raid. There have been towns that have been wiped off the map there, and it's been going on for close 75 years now. Children have to be. I spoke with someone from the Bethlehem YMCA who was dealing with what do you do with your children who are terrified by bombings every night. And I should say at the same time, because I do want to maintain balance there, I believe there's also generational trauma among Jews in Israel and around the world for thousands of years of anti-Semitism, thousands of years of you can visit Jewish ghettos in various places around the Western world, around Europe. The Holocaust, I mean, all of this goes into the mix. And so when I think of a solution, and by all means, I am not a political scientist, I feel like the sort of the house that's on fire right now is this what's happening to Palestinian culture and Palestinian land and the Palestinian people and the state violence. As soon as, or even in anticipation of that being resolved, there has to be an acute awareness that Israel is in a very vulnerable position as well, and both of those things will need attention. It would be naive to say Israel, Israeli military should stop targeting Palestinian citizens and then everything will be okay. It will not. Israel is also a small country in a place that isn't always friendly to Jewish people and to Israel.
Right. I'm just trying to think of other ways, that other spaces that we could hold as Unitarians so this is, the WhatsApp group is fantastic, and you're organizing participation in the marches. And are they mostly in London?
There are events that are going on in other places. If you go to the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign website, I think there's a list of different actions going on in different places. Of course, people can write their MP. Yeah, so there are ways people outside London can get involved.
Fantastic. That's really important in this country, that we don't be completely London focused. And yeah, I mean, I would just love to see this conversation bubbling up in congregations, because I have had personal experience of congregations that just don't want to talk about anything that's even vaguely political. And it's really difficult life is political. Everything we do is political in a certain kind of way. And these conversations, if we don't have them, are going to be had in different ways and maybe not with information that we need. And so if we can have them in a way that's informed, with people with lived experience, with people with specialized knowledge, then we can all learn something from each other.
Yeah, I think it's a good way of putting it, that the conversation is going to be happening whether we're part of it or not. So our willingness to show up, focus on what's important, and to treat everybody with respect and dignity just makes that conversation that much more morally grounded. And I do encourage people to stay open to truth. I encourage people to ask questions, because it's not just about kind of wading in and giving an opinion. It's asking, what don't I know? What am I missing? And I was just reading something earlier about learning in general, but it was about, they talked about welcoming diversity and conflict, tolerating ambiguity and embracing paradox. That was in the context of education and learning, but I think that's a big part of what needs to happen here. I think if everybody were willing to do that and engage with this situation, we'd be closer to some kind of a solution that would actually stick and would last.
No, completely agree. Are there any other final parting thoughts you have on this subject?
I'll reiterate what I said in the beginning, that my heart is with everybody who's struggling with this. My heart is with everyone who feels some fear because of the sort of the identity group that they are affiliated with, and of course for the families of everybody who's actually kind of experienced this violence.
Very well said. Well, thank you very much. And for anybody who would like more information about joining the WhatsApp group, you can be in touch with me or with Adam Slate if you happen to know his details. You've been listening to People So Bold, the Unitarian Social Action Podcast, a production of the General Assembly of Unitarian and Free Christian Churches. If you would like more information about the topics explored in this podcast, please refer to the People So Bold newsletter. You can sign up for this newsletter by sending an email to ahowell@unitarian.org.uk.